For almost 20 years, this company has been the leader in the business that built Silicon Valley. Now, the numbers say that core business is bleeding out, market share collapsing from more than 80% to almost nothing. Andy Grove looks up at his co-founder, Gordon Moore, and asks one question. If we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what would he do? He would get us out of memories. Then Grove says, why don't you and I walk out the door, come back, and do it ourselves? What would you do in that moment? Today's episode steps into that decision room with Andy Grove and Intel, not to tell a heroic turnaround story, but to dissect one question, the one question that let him do the thing most leaders can't, kill the thing that made him successful. This is not mainly a story about technology. It's a story about identity, sunk cost, and a decision-making tool you can use in your own company this week. The frame is simple. The reality Intel was facing, the options on the table, why the obvious answer was emotionally impossible, and how Grove used the outsider test to cut through it all. Intel was founded in 1968 as a memory company. The original idea was that semiconductor memory could replace magnetic core memory in computers, and within a decade, Intel had nearly 100% market share in the memory market it helped create. Inside Intel, memory was not just the primary product. It was a source of technical pride and institutional identity. Engineers believed memory chips were the technology drivers of the company because each new manufacturing process was first proven on memory before spreading to other products. If you asked what Intel was, the implicit answer was clear. A memory company that happened to make some logic chips. Then the economics broke that identity apart. In the early 1980s, Japanese companies like Fujitsu, Hitachi, NEC, and Toshiba flooded the DRAM market with chips that were cheaper and higher quality than Intel's. HP audit showed that the Japanese chips had better yields and fewer defects, and by 1982, Japan had overtaken the US in global memory share. By 1987, Japan controlled about 80% of the DRAM market, while Intel's share fell from about 83% to 1.3%. Global DRAM prices dropped 60% in a single year as supply poured into the market. Intel was losing money on the business that built the company. By mid-1985, Intel's leadership faced a binary decision. Invest roughly $100 million in a new 1 megabit DRAM facility or admit the memory business was over for them. This wasn't a brainstorming session. It was a survival decision. What was at stake? Intel's founding identity, hundreds of engineers whose careers were built around memory, customer relationships going back nearly 2 decades, and a belief system that said memory products were essential to the company's technical engine. What were the constraints? The memory business was bleeding cash, microprocessors were still treated internally as a secondary business, and the company had years of sunk cost in plants, tools, expertise, and careers tied to DRAM. That was what made the decision so hard. This was not fundamentally a strategy question, it was an identity question. Grove later wrote that Intel had 2 beliefs as strong as religious dogmas. That memories were the technology drivers, and that the sales force could not function without a complete memory product family. Under those beliefs, a rational discussion about exiting memory was practically impossible. One option was to fight for memory, write the $100 million check, build the next DRAM facility, and try to regain leadership. That option sounds bold, but the numbers didn't support it. Japan's advantage was structural. Lower costs, better quality, stronger yields, and greater scale, not a temporary dip Intel could simply outlast. Option 2 was the hybrid path. Keep a presence in niche memory segments like SRAM or EPROM while continuing to grow microprocessors. On paper, that looked prudent. In reality, it meant spending capital and management attention on the dying business while undercommitting to the emergency one. Option 3 was a full exit. Leave DRAM entirely and redirect resources toward microprocessors. Then there was the default option, which is often the most dangerous one. Defer the decision. Keep studying it, keep hedging, keep hoping the market changes before you have to say out loud that the old identity is gone. That was effectively what Intel had been doing for a year, and the losses kept compounding. That is the context for the cubicle conversation. Grove is sitting with Gordon Moore, looking at the catastrophic memory numbers and asking the question that reframes everything. If we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what would he do? He would get us out of memories. This is the breakthrough. Grove creates a bias removal tool in real time. He strips away history, loyalty, sunk costs, and self-protection, and asks what a rational outsider would do with the facts in front of them. Then he pushes it further. Why don't you and I walk out the door, come back and do it ourselves? That is the decision, not just recognizing the answer, but deciding to become the outsider before someone else forces the company to do it. Even after that conversation, it took more than a year to execute the exit from memory. That delay matters because it shows how hard good decisions become when they threaten institutional identity. Engineers feared Intel would lose its manufacturing edge without memory products to develop new processes on. The sales force feared customers would abandon Intel without a complete product line available. Middle management, especially memory teams like the Oregon Group, resisted because microprocessors did not feel like a continuation of their work. They felt like the burial of it. And under all of that sat the sunk cost trap. Money already spent, careers already built, factories already staffed. The instinct was to preserve optionality, but in reality, the hedge was just prolonged pain. Grove's response was to insist on data-based decisions and reject half measures. If the business was no longer competitive, sentiment could not be allowed to keep it alive. The immediate result was painful. Intel shut 8 plants. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, and longtime memory customers had to find new suppliers. The financial pain did not disappear overnight. Intel's losses extended through 1985 before the microprocessor business matured enough to create sustainable growth. But the core capabilities of the company did not disappear with memory. They were redirected. The groundwork for microprocessors had already been laid years earlier. In 1971, Intel created the 4004 after buying back design rights from Visicom, creating the first microprocessor. In 1981, IBM selected Intel's 8088 for its PCs, which helped set the architecture for personal computing. After the memory exit, Grove pushed the 386 aggressively, and that product became the engine of Intel's dominance. By 1992, Intel was the world's largest semiconductor company. The first principle is this: identity attachment is a strategic liability. Intel's deepest problem was not just Japanese competition. It was that Intel defined itself as a memory company. As long as memory was who we are, the company could not evaluate memory rationally. The breakthrough came when Intel implicitly redefined itself around capability instead of product. The capability was semiconductor design and manufacturing. Memory was only one expression of that capability. The second principle is this: the outsider test removes emotional inertia. Grove's question was not rhetorical. It was a practical way to cut through sunk costs, guilt, loyalty, and a narrative of self-protection. If a rational outsider can see the answer in 30 seconds, but the insider team has been delaying it for a year, the problem is usually not missing information. It's emotional attachment. And the third principle is this: at true inflection points, half measures are slower failure. Intel spent nearly a year trying variations of the hybrid path before fully exiting memory. That didn't make the company safer. It made the transition more expensive. When the underlying economics of the business have changed, hedging often preserves optionality at the cost of conviction. That can feel prudent, but is often just delayed surrender. The fourth principle is this: paranoia is a practice. Grove's worldview, later captured in the phrase, "only the paranoid survive," became a management system built on stress testing assumptions and treating success as a danger signal because it creates complacency. This is where the story becomes useful. Start by running your own outsider test. Pick one product, team, market, or operating assumption in your business that you keep revisiting but never fully resolve. Then ask the Grove question. If a new leader walked in tomorrow with no emotional attachment to the past, what would that person cut, exit, or double down on? Write down the answer before you defend yourself. If the answer feels obvious, then the barrier is probably not analytical. It's emotional, political, or identity-based. Next, audit your own religious dogmas. Every company has them. Beliefs that feel foundational because they were once true, but now survive mostly because nobody wants to challenge them. Ask whether each belief is a real constraint or just inherited logic from an earlier version of the business. The beliefs that feel most dangerous to question are often the ones creating the most drag. Then, separate capability from product. Intel survived because its underlying capability world-class semiconductor design and manufacturing, could be redirected after memory stopped being viable. What's your equivalent? What capability would still matter if your current product vanished tomorrow? Finally, if the outsider test gives you a clear answer, stop pretending the hybrid path is automatically safer. At genuine strategic inflection points, indecision often looks like prudence right up until the market makes the decision for you. The hardest decisions are rarely the ones where the answer is hidden. They're the ones where the answer is obvious, but accepting it would require you to become someone different than the person who built what you have now. So here is the real question. What would the new leader do, and why are you making them wait? Until next time, stay unstoppable.